Why are church authorities so often deceived by controversial groups? A few days after his election to the throne of Peter, Pope Benedict took an exceptional measure. He opened the secret archives of the Vatican to gather all the files related to Father Maciel and the Legionary of Christ. 212 documents were recovered. The prelates who worked on those documents discovered with horror the whole sad truth. Since the end of the 1940s, many charges had been made against Father Maciel. Among these documents, they found letters from the late 1940s written by the superiors of the University of Comillas, denouncing the unhealthy influence of Father Maciel upon his disciples and his tendency to lie. There were letters of teachers denouncing the ability of Father Maciel to manipulate people, letters of the highest ecclesial authorities of Mexico denouncing acts of sodomy on young members of the congregation and the consumption of narcotics. The worst documents being certainly the testimonies of some members of the congregation giving many details about the crimes of the founder. These letters, reports, memos, faxes, and press articles were put together in a single folder, then studied, summarized, and numbered. What all these documents reveal, especially, is the incredible ability of Father Maciel to overcome the immune system of the Catholic Church. The people who performed these investigations got cold sweats. The documents were burning their fingers. An increasingly obvious truth appeared. Father Maciel was a monster, inspired by diabolical designs. He was a seducer who had been capable of evading the vigilance of the Vatican during his whole life. What is probably most pathetic is that the scenario repeats itself over and over again. Father Maciel is accused, church authorities are worried, Father Maciel says he's a victim and activates his networks of influences in the Curia. Church authorities decide to save the Legion and obviously are fooled. The issue is classified and forgotten, time passes, until new charges, and the same scenario repeats again and again. When it became clear that the Pope Benedict was trying to cover up the scandal, prelates who had access to these archives had enormous problem of conscience. Should they transmit those documents to persons able to use them intelligently to make the truth be known, or should they support a terrible lie that could engulf the whole church into the darkness? Getting out all these secret documents was an act of high treason, but no matter, their choice was made. And so they brought facsimiles of those 212 documents to Fernando González, a great Mexican academic who then wrote 2 books with those documents. Marcial Maciel, Los Legionarios de Cristo, Testimonios y Documentos Inéditos, Marcial Maciel, The Legionaries of Christ, Testimonies and Unpublished Documents, and La Voluntad de no saber, The Will Not to Know. About a third part of those 212 documents are letters of denunciation or alarming reports on Father Maciel and the situation of the Legion of Christ. So, why didn't the Church intervene? The Church leaders maintain a passionate relationship with the Legion of Christ. They are fascinated by this young congregation with so many vocations. When everything seems to fall apart, when Christianity is slowly disappearing in the West, the Legion of Christ, as most communities were speaking about in this conference, appears as a miraculous solution to all our problems. When everything goes wrong, you are vulnerable and you support blindly anything that seems to provide solutions, and you justify it by saying, these are the signs of the time, or we should trust God's work, and that's all. The main argument put forward by the authorities of the Church is that we judge the tree by its fruits. In 1958, all the very serious charges against Father Maciel had been wiped out only because of this single reason. There are these fruits, so the founder of such a beautiful community cannot be perverse. No need to go further. Criticism has to be slanders and calumnies. 50 years later, in late 2008, members of the congregation were informed about some aspect of the double life of their founder. The superiors could not continue to cover up the scandal as they had done for years. The children of Father Maciel were about to reveal the truth in the media. So, in November 2008, in order to prevent members from leaving the congregation or from wanting to know more about their founder, 3 very important cardinals from the Roman Curia came to the legionaries and gave them a conference. Thanks to recent leaks in Mexico, we obtained the recordings of those lectures, and I would like to share with you some extracts. From Prode, prefect of the Congregation for Institute of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life. The policy of zero tolerance? No, in the Church we're not like that. We leave that to the Puritans. And I would go to the bottom of what is taught in Matthew chapter 7. Any good tree bears good fruit, and the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Now, the fruits are good. The fruits are extremely good. They're great. They're beautiful. So, can we say that the tree was bad? In pure logic, I would say no. And I absolve Father Maciel. Cardinal Angelo Sodano, Dean of the College of Cardinals of the Catholic Church, former Secretary of State of the Vatican. If a diamond or a gold ring falls into the mud, it gets dirty. But then we simply need to clean it to make it shine again. Do not stay with the image of the jewelry when it is covered in mud. Therefore, it seems to me that the plan of God for the Legion tells us that the Legion must continue, and it seems to me that this is the will of the Sovereign Pontiffs. Cardinal Dario Castrillon Hoyos, President of the Pontifical Commission Ecclesia Dei and former Prefect of the Congregation for the Clergy. Because a man chosen by God, Martial Maciel, received the divine light and did what God wanted of him, as Christ wished, there were among his ancestors a number of women of little virtue. Thus, one who had no sin had been surrounded genetically by sin, we might say. Hosanna to the Son of David, glory to the Legion, even if it is a victim of human weaknesses, a victim of the power of evil. He was the man chosen by God, who also paid tribute to evil. Nobody knew about his second life because he was wise. That's a huge and important Christian virtue. Thus, when he formed you, divine providence acted so the power of the message he conveyed to the Legion of Christ did not get lost. And that is why most of legionnaires never knew anything. So, they were able to receive the message in simplicity and calm. At the Congress of the ICSA in Montreal last year, the issue of the fruits and the tree has already been discussed at length. Yet, I would like to add some personal reflection. Let's first read again the Gospel passage. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them. Note that the parable of Jesus consists of 2 parts. First, Christ says that every good tree bears good fruit, and its corollary, the bad tree bears bad fruit. Then, as if he felt the need to remove ambiguities, Christ adds that a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. A logician would say that in the first part, Christ puts a sufficient condition. If the tree is good, it bears good fruit. And in the second part, he puts a necessary conditions. If and only if the tree is good, it bears good fruit. In other words, it is not possible to say that a very bad founder could bear good fruit without wringing the neck of the teaching of Christ, who anticipated any doubts by establishing an explicit and necessary rule which does not support any exception. So the explanation is to be sought in the fruits. These famous fruits which delight the authorities of the church so much, are they so good as they look? Indeed, Christ never said that evil was not bearing fruit. On the contrary, evil also bear fruits, and even a lot of beautiful fruits. But he said that the fruits of the bad tree were not good. Here is the point. We must distinguish real fruit from apparent fruits. The bad tree produces many beautiful fruits that look so good at first glance, but are actually extremely harmful. Remember the passage of the temptation of Eve in the book of Genesis chapter 3. The devil never tempts his prey with ugly and shriveled fruit. Some people argue that we shall see the sign of the time. Pope John Paul II spoke about a new spring of the church, but I would rather speak about the fall of the church, because the real statistics are not very glorious. The number of young people living in these communities, usually most severely damaged, is very frightening. Most of my old companions have already left the congregation, some with nervous breakdowns, suicidal behaviors. One of them had even to stay in a psychiatric hospital a couple of times. In fact, these communities do a lot of damage. I believe many of those young men could have become great priests in other conditions, but they abandon this project sometimes totally disgusted with the church. It's so difficult to keep loving where you've been abused. This is not enough to answer our question. Part of the problem with the Catholic Church, as well as other denominations, is the tendency of church officials to define cult theologically. Hence, Cardinal Schönborn has argued that a cult, by definition, cannot exist in the church because a cult's beliefs are heretical, and if a group is heretical, it places itself outside the church. The church disregards cultic studies. She maintained the idea that cults are the others. She even thinks that associations working on cultic issues are using this method to attack religion. I know that it is something widely discussed that raises a lot of arguments, but it seems to me worth repeating one thing. Cults deal with deeds, not creeds. Of course, certain belief can produce certain practices, but this link is not necessary. The psychological approach on cultic studies show the incredible capacity of human psyche to assume huge contradiction. Yes, you can pretend to be a great defender of the gospel and yet deny the teaching of the gospel all day long through your actions. Yes, you can pretend to be a great defender of freedom of conscience and yet tolerate coercive means inside your group to discourage any dissension. The difficulty lies in the fact that the cult phenomenon generates tremendous autosuggestion mechanism. In a cult, the adept learns to deny his own identity and to lie not only to the world, not only to his parents and friends, but also to himself. Thus, a people who is under the influence of a cult will always pretend to be perfectly free and happy, even if it's not at all. And that is why we must be very careful with testimonies of people who are under mind control, because they have a compulsive and irrational need to defend their vocation, their group, and their guru. I know this well. I wore that mask. But this is still not enough. Another essential element is necessary: silence. Silence is one of the key elements of the previous system. In this issue, silence appeared in three contexts: inside the group, inside the ecclesiastical institution, among the former members. Let's develop this idea a little bit. Silence inside the group. Inside the community, silence may be achieved through several means: a rule, a promise, or even a vow that is imposed in the name of charity, a mistaken understanding of obedience that should be blind and heroic, a system of denunciation when a member begins to criticize is included immediately and sent to the mission, the fact that inside the group everything is partitioned so that each religious ignores what his brother knows, each religious only knows a very small part of the problem, and a very tight control of incoming information. Silence is necessary to keep people ignorant. To this day, members of the Legion of Christ still know almost nothing about the true story of their founder. In April 2010, the superiors of the congregation made a nice resolution by engaging themselves to honor the truth about our history, as I said in an official statement. But a few weeks later, the Vatican appointed a papal delegate, Cardinal Villaggio de Paulis, who decided a year later that it was time to turn the page. In the lecture given to women consecrated in early 2012, even threatened those who would try to learn the truth about their founder. We have to leave in God's hand the judgment of the founder. The question should already be closed. We cannot go back repeatedly on those facts and stir them up all the time. But this is very serious. Why? Because the critical studies on the true story of Father Maciel show clearly that Father Maciel spent his life rewriting his own history in order to always appear as a protagonist and a hero. And some of his most zealous disciples, for that reason, have accentuated also this phenomenon in adding some more lies. If the legionaries learn who were their founder, it is likely that the legion would collapse on itself, and this is probably why the delegate of the Pope stopped any investigation on the subject. Then the silence of the ecclesial institution. I will not dwell on this vast subject, but it would be. But I will only say, because it seems to me important, that we find a compulsive need of secrecy not only in the cultic religious communities, but also in the Church herself. This secrecy appears in almost every pages of the 212 documents in the archive I mentioned earlier. When we study this document, we realize how much the Church herself lives in a kind of paranoia toward the world. The secrecy of the Church was one of the strongest lies of Father Maciel. Thanks to that, only very few people knew the extent of the seriousness of this crime. For many years, very few victims dared to make public accusation against their former community and their former superiors. We must remember that former members of cultic communities are often in very complex situations that require them to remain silent. Some have suffered too much. This part of their life is now like a shadow whose mere mention is so painful that they decide never to talk about it. Others do not want to have problems or think it would be a lost cause. Sometimes, with some very close friends, they dare some criticism, but for fear of reprisals, they prefer not to expose themselves in public. Some still have a brother, sister, or other family members in the former community. They know that if they speak, they risk losing contact, and therefore they prefer not to take that risk. Some are totally depressed. They have neither the strength nor the ability to denounce the abuses they have suffered. Some of them fall into alcoholism and sometimes even drugs. Omerta for those who committed serious misconducts or crimes when they were inside. Fraud, embezzlements, abuses. They are bound by a pact of silence, my silence against your silence. Those who entered very young or have been raised in a community can to see the leader of this community as their own parents. For them, a critical reading would be a traumatic experience, a kind of parasite. Some were asked by their former community to tell their vocational testimony on a webpage or in a Christian magazine. Driven by the pressure of the system, they embellished their story, and their testimony were published with a kind of title, Chosen from Eternity, or I was struck by the call of God. Difficult, after such statements, to question their previous community. Natural. Those whose family are very Catholic, even conservative, have to fight a great taboo. In this atmosphere, it is unthinkable to express any criticism of a religious congregation recognized and appreciated by the Vatican. Some former members are silenced because of simple economical reasons. After spending 10, 20 or 30 years in a community, their active life has been hugely delayed. When you begin your career at 35 or 45, it's difficult to spend time, energy and money to fight against your former community. After leaving the congregation, some still continue to work in a school or an apostolate that belong to the other. Difficult to imagine that they will saw off the branch on which they are sitting. Some wanted to talk, but were quickly dissuaded by the good advices of their families and friends. Leave it in the hand of the church. You don't trust the judgment of the church? Turn over a new page. You certainly lack humility to criticize another recognized by the Vatican. Don't you see that the devil will use you to hurt the church? There are those who remember with fear how they spoke about traitors in their previous community. The mere thought of being part of this blacklist, to be considered an infamous Judas, terrorized and forever deters from performing any duty of conscience. There are also those who join the diocesan clergy and are taught by their bishop to remain silent. And finally, there are those who remain in the influence of their previous community. These are dangerous people. Internally mined by guilt, they are trying to get redemption from their community and are sometimes willing to do anything to protect the group from the outside. As usual, people will say, well, you're too negative. You only speak from your personal experience and you feel bitter. That's why you're so critical. Maybe. But please, if so, just answer the following questions. Why did the Pope Benedict say in the book Light of the World that he only began to have serious elements of doubt regarding Father Maciel in 2000? Why did he insult once against all the victims who denounced for so many years the crimes of Maciel? Why did he allow thousands of people to continue worshipping their founder as a true saint until 2009? Why did he endorse such a lie during at least 10 years? How many lives could have been saved from the Legion if he had told the truth? How do you explain that after retrieving all those documents about Father Maciel, this led only to ask him to retire from public ministry in 2006, while Pope Benedict had all the proof about the evil of this man? Why didn't they offer Father Maciel a last chance to confront justice and maybe to save his soul? How do you explain that some prelates have sent very confidential documents to a Mexican academic? How do you explain that it is only when the children of Father Maciel approached the Legion with DNA evidences and lawyers to demand their inheritance that the Legion finally acknowledged the double life of the founder? When we know for sure fact that most superiors knew the truth for years. And if there were not these damned offspring threatening to reveal everything to the media, would the Church have maintained the deception? Would we still be worshipping the holy founder of the Legionaries of Christ? How do you explain that, despite the seriousness of the charges, Pope Benedict did not have the good sense to stop the ordination and recruitments in the Legion, at least during the time of the investigation? I mean, when you discover that the founder of one of the most influential order of the Church is an abuser, a pervert, a pedophile, a bisexual, incestuous, polygamist, psychopath, a criminal, drug addict, intriguing, manipulative, charlatan, thief, forger, plagiarist, usurper of identity, sacrilegious, and produced apostasy, don't you think that there may be a problem? Don't you ask yourself, could we be wrong? Let's stop everything and do real investigation until we know for sure that the congregation order is healthy. How do you explain that the apostolic visitors almost only met legionaries and hardly any former legionnaires? How do you explain the attitude of the visitor during the apostolic visitation, trying to prevent some legionaries from leaving the congregation? How do you explain that only one visitor met with the victims of Father Maciel's sexual abuse? This visitor was a tired old man who listened with half an ear without taking notes and who would die a few months later? Why didn't Pope Benedict agree to receive the victims during his trip to Mexico in 2012? Please, Tell me. I need answer. Well, I will conclude with a quotation from the Gospel of John. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. No comment.